It's been a long process. I started in 2009 just offloading my memory because I was forgetting things that happened to me. And it was only last year, May, that I really decided, or a friend of mine looked at the manuscript and she said, well, there's a story to be told, so let's do something about it.
And at what point did you sort of start to say to yourself, you know what, my career, my life is inextricably tied up with that of Nelson Mandela?
I don't think there was ever time to really think about that. When I think back, John, it's as if there's 19 years missing in my life. It was just all consumed by work. Not that I hope I don't sound regretful about it. It's just,
no, you don't. You're very proud.
It's just a chunk of life that's gone, but you get so sucked into being so busy and living on adrenaline, you don't get time. Maybe it's a good thing to think about what's really happening to your life.
You met the most extraordinary people as a result of having this very close relationship with Nelson Mandela. You travelled all over the world. You didn't do much sightseeing because Zelda felt that she had to stay in the hotel room just in case Madiba needed her. So no sightseeing, just arrive in Tokyo, arrive wherever, and wait in a hotel room to be called, to be summoned, which often you were.
Yeah, I can tell you who gives you the best shower caps in the world, and the toiletries. I can explain all of that to you, and I can explain room service to you, and I can tell you what kitchens look like all across the world.
You were within a metre away from George Bush and Bill Clinton. You were quite friendly. You became quite friendly with Bill Clinton and George Bush and Barack Obama. You met once, and Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You had an audience with the Grand Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, which you weren't supposed to do as a woman. The King of Saudi Arabia shook your hand, which was completely and utterly contrary to custom. He's not allowed to be close to a woman. You had these amazing experiences.
Because of Madiba, yes. I don't know what you do with that. It's a bliss. It's just my entire life. It's extraordinary because of Madiba, of course. But I hope to pay tribute to him through this book by telling, the privileges or sharing the privileges I've had.
And you were prepared to be an attack dog for him.
Yes, I was known as a Rottweiler before Gary Nel became the Bull Terrier. But I also realized it was I didn't enter a popularity contest. I was never, the person in that position was never going to be popular. So I've got my fair share of enemies, but now people actually comment and they say, but you're actually a nice person. I said, of course. But I had to assume this role to protect him, and you have to remember that you fulfill the wishes of the person that pays your salary. So I had to make sure he's happy with the way I conduct business around him. And I now say to people, I hope he would have fired me if he wasn't happy before 19 years, 20 years passed. So
because everybody wanted
a piece of
him. And if they were offered a tiny piece, they wanted a bigger piece. And they told lies, and they cheated, and they faked things in order to get close to him. And you had to develop radar to work out who was genuine, who could be trusted, who couldn't, and keep away from him those who were going to distract from his mission.
I think that's also something that I'll take forward in life now. I've developed that sense of I can actually tell you what you want before you even speak to me. I can sense it on people's faces now.
He had this constant parade of the good and the great and the not so great of the world wanting to meet him. And if they were politicians, he sort of tended to know who they were. And if they were Don King, then he was very excited to meet him because of the boxing connection. But a lot of the sort of cultural people, the movie stars, he had no idea who they were. I mean, you got on very well with Brad Pitt, but Madiba had no idea who this person was.
Yes, and Brad took it in his stride. I mean, he was so modest that Madiba asked him, despite me explaining who Brad Pitt was, it was just not part of his world. The entertainment wasn't part of his world. And I explained to him Brad was going to visit us, and when Brad appeared, Madiba asked him, do you have a business card? And Brad, he said, no, unfortunately not. And Madiba went further and he said, so what do you do for a living? And Brad, of course, said, I try acting for a living. And I said, no, he was just being modest. He's he's one of the best in the world, very good actor. So, yeah, Brad was very, he took it in, as I say, in his stride, and he was very respectful of Madiba and of his age and circumstances and so on. So he didn't expect him to make a big hoo-ha. Others did.
You're on holiday, family holiday in Mauritius. After a few days, he was quite old now. He was probably late 80s, I would think,
yes.
by now. Announced that he wanted to go into the water. We were hesitant as we were not sure whether he would be able to stand in the water. He was having difficulty walking, using a walking stick. Security took him down to the terrace to the water, and he sat on a chair in the water, allowing the waves to break over his feet. The pure joy on his face touched my heart in a way that is difficult to describe. How could something so ordinary, something we take for granted, bring such pleasure to a human being? We then discovered that Madiba hadn't swum in the sea for over 40 years. The last time he'd been in the ocean was when he removed seaweed from the water while on Robben Island. It's those moments that you shared with him that are so rich and so textured.
Yes, also being removed from society for so long, many things passed him by, and I don't think we as public really have an appreciation for what that means in a person's life. And then you are released at an elderly age, and these things that were part of our daily lives almost as normal human beings going about our lives, then becomes so extraordinary for a person like him. The political animal can enjoy something, the political animal in him can enjoy something as simple as the beauty of music and flowers, but we don't think of it. And in this case particularly, the ocean breaking over his feet. Mm-hmm. The pleasure that brought to that man was just unbelievable to watch.
And you spent a lot of time with him as his faculties began to decline. There's another very touching moment, and you'd have to remind him often of who was coming and what had happened and this and that, and the memory was going, and he would look at you with that very special smile and say, you must remember I'm nearly 100 years old.
And he did so in public on many occasions, reminding people, I'm almost 100 years old now. And if you thought about it, it was the truth. But we as a public, again, we didn't allow him just the space to almost just age gracefully, but, giving him that space. And
we kept wanting him to fix everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And people still do, even now.
Zelda, the most difficult part of the book for you to write, the most difficult part of the time to have lived through, as it was for many people who were very close to him and loved him, as you did and do, was those final days. How sick was he, going in and out of hospital, Cape Town, ambulance breaking down on the way to one military hospital, the time at Mill Park Hospital, and the declining faculties, and then the funeral, the mess of the memorial service, and being frozen out. And quite clearly that was a very, very difficult time for you. You felt that you were not a member of family. You had to step outside. But this was a man with whom you'd spent almost every day of your life for 20 years. He loved you, you loved him. Very difficult time.
Yes, I had to remind myself at that point as well that my relationship with him was not defined by the fact whether I stood next to his open grave or not. I have 18, 19 years of memories with him, and that's worth more than standing next to anyone's open grave. So the reason why I wrote these things was really not out of nastiness or trying to put blame on anyone. People asked me particular questions because they know I was the go-to person for 19 years if they wanted access to Madiba. Suddenly I couldn't help them get access to his funeral or to pay their last respects to their friend. So I had to answer those questions. The public asked, why didn't we see you at the funeral? I had to answer those questions. There's unpleasantness in everybody's life, and this is just part of the unpleasantness in my life. It was a hard time. It was a very emotional time. But so it was like that for the rest of the country and the rest of the world.
I think we all knew that Nelson Mandela loved Graça Machel and Graça Machel loved Nelson Mandela. But you acknowledge that certainly in the beginning your relationship with Graça was difficult. But you have an enormous amount of respect for her, and she quite clearly began to see how important you were to Madiba.
Yes, at the end she was actually the one that defended me and my position, and she was the one to remind me, Madiba is the one that taught you courage, so live up to it? And secondly, why do you feel the need to justify your position when you were handpicked by him to serve him? So she's my second mother. I adore her, I love her, but she's played a huge role in my life and also teaching me certain things. I want to say I'm almost closer to her because we are both female. I'm almost closer to her than I ever was to Madiba.
Really?
Yes, because we can share an emotional side that I never shared with Madiba. She knows when she sees me, she knows what's happening in my eyes, she can see my facial expression. Whatever, she knows me very, very well.
The element of service, which Nelson Mandela recognized in you and made grow, that doesn't disappear because Nelson Mandela is no longer with us.
No, absolutely, but I'm dedicating quite a big chunk of my time organizing the Bikers for Mandela Day every year. I'm committed to the First for Women Insurance Foundation. I'm committed to Beeldkinderfonds, so that's my contribution to charity. But I also, I mean, service means a lot of things could mean a lot of things to people. I don't necessarily want to do charity for the rest of my life or full time. But service could be different forms. Yeah.
And reclaiming a personal life. I mean,
Yes.
Again, it's. I feel comfortable talking about it with you here because you talk about it in the book. The difficulty of sustaining a relationship. No. The difficulty of the flings and so on.
Yes,
There's
sure,
now space to explore that side of yourself.
Yes, I was saying to people earlier today, I wish I had a normal life and I could sit at Camps Bay having lunch with real friends, with normal people, just have a normal life again.
Instead of Brad Pitt and Pierce Brosnan. Shame.
I'll get to that eventually. I know there's an expiry date to this, and this is the last chapter of my life with Madiba, so who knows when the shelf life will come to an end. I'll see.